Who brings a child to a blind date and tells no one he's a millionaire? That's exactly what Russell Griffin did. A tech tycoon with nothing left to believe in, he set up 7 anonymous dates to prove one thing: love is fake and everyone wants something. 6 women failed before the appetizer. But the 7th didn't speak to him at all. She looked at the quiet boy beside him and asked what he was listening to in his headphones. What followed wasn't a love story with grand gestures or glitter. It was a quiet revolution told in drawings, recorded voices, and a child's single whispered sentence. And it all began when the wrong woman sat at the right table. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Russell Griffin didn't believe in love. He believed in encryption, in firewalls, in data that didn't lie. He believed in locking your gates and screening your calls and reading people like security threats. But love? No. Love had failed his son. And people who failed Sasha didn't get second chances. It had been 5 years since his ex-wife left. Left a letter. Left a child. Left a silence so deep even Sasha had stopped speaking for a while. Now, at 9 years old, his son lived mostly in his own world, a world of oversized headphones, old radio dramas, and a small vintage recorder he carried everywhere. People thought he was strange. Russell thought he was perfect, and no woman had ever proved him wrong. Still, here he was, dressed down in a plain gray hoodie and jeans. Sitting across from date number 6, a glossy-haired woman who had already asked about his salary, his car, and why the kid wasn't sitting with a nanny. She's not the one, Sasha had said later in the car. He didn't use many words, but when he did, they landed like quiet truths. This one sounded hollow, like someone pretending to laugh on the radio. Russell didn't argue. He never did. Sasha heard things others didn't. 7 blind dates. That was the deal he made with himself. Just 7. One final test to silence his therapist, his brother, and the last sliver of hope clinging to the idea that someone might love him, them, without knowing his name was worth hundreds of millions. 6 down. 1 left. Date number 7 was set for a quiet Tuesday afternoon at a small bistro tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. The place was anonymous, just the way he liked it. Sasha wore his favorite navy sweater and sat beside him, flipping through a tiny sketch pad with smudged superhero faces. Russell checked his watch. He wasn't excited. He wasn't anything. Until the bell over the door jingled and she walked in. Not the kind of woman you'd expect on a blind date. No glossy curls. No designer handbag. She had windswept hair pulled into a low bun, a tote bag covered in ink stains, and sensible shoes. She looked around, eyes scanning the room, and headed toward them. She hesitated for half a beat. "Hi, are you Liam?" Russell blinked. "No, but I think your table is actually here." She frowned, checked her phone again. "Wait, I think this is me. Unless you're not." "Adrian?" "Nope." "Oh." She started to turn, then looked at Sasha. "Is this your seat?" she asked softly. The boy didn't answer. He didn't even look up. But then something rare happened. He paused his recorder. Just a click. Barely audible. But Russell noticed. "I think it's your table now," he said, offering the chair across from Sasha. "Adrian's running late." That wasn't true. There was no Adrian. But something about her tone, the way she asked his son instead of him, made him curious. She hesitated, then sat. Slowly. Like someone easing into water they weren't sure was warm. They didn't speak much at first. Russell observed. She didn't look at her phone. Didn't glance at his shoes or fidget with a straw. Instead, her eyes followed Sasha's fingers as they tapped softly on the recorder. "What are you listening to?" she asked eventually. No answer. She smiled gently and reached into her bag. Pulled out a book with a cracked spine. "I brought this. In case it got awkward." She set it on the table. A collection of fairy tales. At that, Sasha looked up. Just for a moment. Then, he took off one headphone and passed it to her. Russell's chest tightened. She accepted it, carefully fitting the foam over her ear. For the next 30 seconds, they sat in silence. A crackling voice told an old British tale about a clever fox. And the girl, this stranger with ink on her fingers and rain in her hair, smiled. Sasha hit pause. Turned to Russell. She's not glass, he whispered. She sounds like a blanket. Russell blinked. The woman tilted her head. I'm sorry, was I not supposed to? No, Russell said, his voice low. That was fine. For the next 20 minutes, they talked about stories. About sound. About how Sasha hated playgrounds but loved voices. She never asked Russell what he did, or where he lived, or why a man like him was bringing a child to a date. She just talked, and listened, and smiled. And when the check came, she reached for it. I've got it, Russell said. She shook her head. Let me at least split it. Your kid just shared his entire fairy tale library with me. Russell studied her. She still didn't know who he was, and she wasn't trying to find out. Outside, the sky was bruised with gray. She pulled on a too-thin jacket and glanced back one last time. I like meeting you both. Really? Russell cleared his throat. Hey, Sasha wants to send you a drawing. If that's okay. Her eyes softened. Of course. Maybe a number? Just for that. She hesitated, then handed him a card. It smelled like peppermint and ink. Sasha waved. A small movement, barely noticeable. But to Russell, it felt like the first crack in a wall he'd spent years fortifying. He looked at the card. Adelinda Zacks. Legal Advocate, Children's Rights Initiative. Just a name. No titles. No glitter. No Instagram handle. He smiled, tucked the card into his wallet, and looked down at his son. Sasha hit record. The card stayed in Russell's wallet for 3 days. He didn't text her. Didn't call. Just carried her name like something fragile and unfinished, like a song that stopped mid-note. Sasha didn't ask. But he watched. On the third night, as they sat in silence eating soup from matching white bowls, Sasha said, "You're waiting for the perfect sentence." Russell looked up. Sometimes, the boy added, "You just need the next one." So Russell sent a message. Sasha wanted me to tell you he drew you. It's just your hands sharing a headphone, but he says they looked like wings. He didn't expect a reply. But a few minutes later, tell him I'm honored. That's the kindest thing anyone said to my hands. Also, he has excellent taste in audio adventures, smiley face. That was all it took. Their next meeting wasn't at a restaurant. It was a park. No fancy setup. No fanfare. Just Russell, Sasha, and a paper bag with sandwiches. Adelinda arrived in sneakers, holding 2 thermoses and a crumpled pack of colored pencils. Figured we'd need warmth and art, she said, nodding at Sasha. He gave a half smile, rare and quiet. But there. They sat under an awning near the duck pond. It started to drizzle, but none of them moved. Sasha drew superheroes. Russell watched Adelinda pour tea. Her voice as she explained the different types of leaves was warm, unrushed, like water over stones. He could feel his body uncoiling in her presence. At one point, she glanced at her watch and sighed. I have a case call soon. A new intake. 3 kids, no paperwork, no heat, no relatives. I might need to go early. Russell turned to her. You work in that kind of environment every day? She shrugged. It's not glamorous. But someone should care. Even if the world doesn't pay attention. Sasha tilted his head. His fingers had stopped drawing. Adelinda looked at him gently. You okay? He reached into his backpack and handed her something. A pair of earbuds. Handmade. Brightly colored wire covers with soft padding, a kid's project. Sloppy but careful. These are for you, he said. So your ears don't get tired when the world's too loud. Russell froze. It was the first full sentence Sasha had spoken to anyone outside of family in over a year. Adelinda blinked, stunned. Thank you, she whispered. She didn't make a big deal of it. She didn't cry. She didn't smother him in praise. She simply accepted the gift, put the earbuds in, and said, perfect fit. That night, after Sasha had gone to bed, Russell stared at his phone again. He had her number, her name, her warmth. But something inside him curled backward, pulling away. Not because she'd done something wrong, but because she was everything right. And people like him, men with broken maps and scars too deep to trace, didn't get to keep people like her. He never texted her again. A week passed. 2. No messages. No follow-up drawing. Sasha noticed. Of course he did. One evening, as they sat watching a nature documentary with the sound low, Sasha whispered, "You disappeared." Russell didn't answer. The boy turned to him, eyes unblinking. "You were there. And then you weren't." That's the part people like her already know. They don't need another ghost. Russell swallowed. He wanted to defend himself, to explain. But instead, he reached into the drawer beside the couch and took out Sasha's recorder. Press play. A quiet scene played back, the rustle of leaves in the park, the clink of thermoses. Then her voice. Gentle. Steady. Describing how tea leaves curl when dried. How sound carries further in the rain. How children sometimes listen better than adults. Sasha had recorded everything. And she sounded exactly like he remembered. He didn't sleep that night. And when morning came, he stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Not grooming. Not rehearsing. Just standing. At breakfast, he asked Sasha, "That day in the park, you said something about her work." The boy nodded. She said they had 3 new kids. Cold house. No hot water. Russell exhaled. Did she mention where she worked? A pause. Then, Children's Rights Initiative. It's in the email. The signature on her card. Russell checked. It was there. That evening, he wrote a letter. Not to her. To her office. Then he wrapped a small package, black, unmarked. Inside, Sasha's recorder. And one final message. Adelinda hadn't expected to think about him again. Not deeply. Not the way you remember someone who barely touched your hand. But Russell and the quiet boy beside him stayed in her thoughts like a melody you couldn't shake. Not loud. Just present. He had vanished without explanation. No goodbye. No message. Just silence. But that, she figured, was typical. Men like him, whoever he really was, always had the option to disappear. She focused on work. On files that needed rewriting. On the boiler at the center that still wasn't fixed. On kids who didn't flinch when they were ignored but cried when someone remembered their birthday. Still, sometimes in the quiet between meetings, she touched the earbuds Sasha gave her. Or opened her notebook and saw the small, uneven drawing he had slipped inside. It wasn't signed. But she knew. She missed him. Both of them. Meanwhile, across the city, Russell watched the postman deliver the package. He didn't sleep the night before. Sasha had helped him wrap the recorder carefully, even wrote to her on a note inside. They hadn't discussed it much. But the boy knew. "Are you scared?" Sasha asked quietly. Russell nodded. "What if she doesn't reply? Then we were still kind." That was Sasha's answer to most things. The next day at the foundation office, Adelinda found a small box on her desk. No name. No return address. She opened it slowly, almost cautiously, like a piece of her past had materialized without warning. Inside, the recorder. She recognized it immediately. The little black device Sasha always held like it was treasure. And then she saw the sticky note. Just press play. She looked around the office. No one was watching. She slipped on the earbuds. The tape started with static. Then footsteps. A child's breath. Then Sasha's voice. "Hi. It's me. I wanted to say thank you. For the tea. And for not being loud. And for speaking in warm colors. Dad says voices don't have colors, but I hear them. Yours is yellow. And blue. Like the blanket I keep for storms. I asked Dad if he hears it too. He said yes. He misses you." A long pause. Then a second voice. "Russell. I told myself I wouldn't record this. That it was too late. But silence never worked in my favor. So here it is. I disappeared because I wanted too much. Because I was afraid that if you knew the truth, who I am, what I own, what people expect from me, you'd stop being the person who asked my son about his headphones instead of my bank account. But you didn't deserve silence. If there's still room for one more voice in your day, we'll be waiting." The recording clicked off. Adelinda sat motionless for a long moment. Her tea had gone cold. Her hands were trembling. She reached for her phone, paused, smiled, then stood. The next afternoon, the school library smelled like glue and old carpet and the soft sugar of bake sale leftovers. Adelinda had been invited to read for a small group of children as part of an outreach event. She hadn't planned to say yes, but today she had. She took her place in a circle of beanbags and tiny chairs, picked a book with worn edges and started reading in that same soft voice Sasha had called blanket-colored. And then, halfway through a page, she noticed him. In the back row, sitting perfectly still, headphones around his neck, recorder in hand. Sasha. Next to him, Russell. No hoodie, just a man in a gray coat holding something in his lap. When the reading ended, the children scattered. Some asked questions. One gave her a drawing, but Sasha walked straight up to her. No words. He simply held out a worn shoebox. Inside, paper, drawings, pages of color and pencil. Her face, once, her hand, her shoulder as she leaned in to listen. And at the bottom, the three of them, Sasha, Russell, and her, sitting together. A little awkward, a little messy. A team. On the last page, in a child's handwriting. "My people." Russell cleared his throat. "I don't want to ruin it," he said. "But if I don't say something, I'll regret it every day after this one." She looked up. "I'm Russell Griffin," he said finally. "Yes, that one. And I'd give it all up if it meant hearing your voice again every morning." A pause. Then, with a quiet smile, Adelinda replied, "You don't have to give anything up. You just have to stay." For the first time in a long while, Russell Griffin didn't have a plan. He'd spent years engineering perfect launches, airtight acquisitions, even the timing of his own press statements down to the second. But when it came to her, to Adelinda, everything was unpredictable in the most terrifying, exhilarating way. They didn't fall into a whirlwind romance. There were no candlelit confessions, no world-shifting kisses in the rain. What they had was quieter. She sent Sasha voice notes with bedtime stories she'd recorded herself. He mailed her random sketches with titles like Lawyer Hero Girl versus Bureaucracy Monster. Sometimes she met them at tiny cafes where no one knew Russell's name. Sometimes she stayed late at the center and Sasha would listen to her explain things to panicked parents, calm but never cold. They built something unannounced, unlabeled, but real. Until the world knocked again. It started with a headline. Who is the mystery woman spotted with tech titan Russell Griffin? Russell found it during a board meeting. The article had grainy, zoomed-in photos, him, Sasha, and a woman in a green coat leaving a public library. Her face was barely visible, but to anyone who knew her, it was clear. Within hours, reporters camped outside her foundation's building. Calls flooded the office. Sponsors raised eyebrows. By evening, one of her colleagues texted, "Are you dating the firewall guy? Please tell me this is a prank." When Russell called, her voice was calm, too calm. "I'm okay," she said. "It's not the worst thing I've been called. You shouldn't have to deal with this. I work with abused families, Russell. I know what real danger looks like. That's not the point." "I know," she cut in gently. "And you're right. But we both knew this might happen." That night, Sasha didn't sleep. He stayed curled in his blanket on the couch. Headphones off, recorder off, eyes wide open. "Did we break her world?" he asked. "No," Russell said, stroking his son's hair. "We just opened the door to ours." The next morning, he arrived at the foundation. No cameras, no entourage. Just him, a paper bag with scones, and a box of colored pencils he knew she'd run out of. But the receptionist gave him a strained smile. "She's in a meeting," she said, "with donors. It's been a rough day." He left the bag. And a note. "I never meant to drag you into this. If you need space, I'll give it. But I hope you won't ask for it. Because I finally want to stay." No reply came. Not that day. Not the next. Sasha was quiet, too. He stopped sketching. Stopped playing audio. His little recorder stayed cold. One night, Russell found him standing near the window, clutching the earbuds Adelinda had fixed. "I ruined it," the boy said. "No," Russell replied. "I did. But I'm the one who said she was warm. You weren't wrong. Then why does it feel like winter again?" On the fifth day of silence, Russell found himself in his office, holding the old recorder. He pressed play, random files, hoping for her voice, her laugh, anything. And then he heard it, from the park. That day, when Sasha gave her the handmade earbuds, she had whispered something low, nearly inaudible. "Some things are worth the noise." Russell smiled, and for the first time in days he made a plan. He called Sasha into the living room. "I want to send her something," he said, "but not a message, not flowers. Something better." The boy tilted his head. "Better how?" "Something only you can give." That evening, they both sat at the kitchen table, elbows touching. Sasha drew, slowly, deliberately, images from their first meeting. The headphone moment, the tea at the park, her laugh under the street lamp. Russell wrote. No signature, no plea, just a story told in sketches and sound. And at the end, a message. They boxed the recorder and the drawings. Sasha wrote on the envelope himself. To her, who listens. The package arrived on a Wednesday morning. Adelinda had already dealt with 2 emergency calls, 1 coffee spill, and a donor who wanted less sob story and more tax write-off. She wasn't in the mood for surprises. But when she saw the box, unmarked, taped neatly, labeled in a child's handwriting, her breath caught. To her, who listens. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. Inside, a small recorder, a sheaf of folded papers, each one hand-drawn. The first sketch, 3 hands, 1 large, 1 small, one with a pen tucked between the fingers, holding the same headphone wire. The next, a park bench under a crooked tree, tea steam rising between silhouettes. Then her, in her green coat, laughing. And finally, Sasha, Russell, and her, drawn together, a little lopsided, a little wobbly, but together. At the bottom, my team. She pressed play on the recorder. Static. A click. A child's voice. Hi, it's me again. I made you a story. It's not perfect, but I hope it feels like something you want to keep. Also, Dad says sorry for being the kind of person who sometimes gets scared right when things get warm. I think he's learning. A pause. Then Russell's voice. Steady. Soft. There's a photo Sasha drew of the 3 of us. I keep it beside my bed. Not because it already happened, but because I want it to. Every day. You don't have to reply. You don't even have to forgive me. But if you still have that blanket-colored voice, we're listening. The recorder clicked off, and her world paused. Not exploded. Not collapsed. Paused, like breath held underwater before choosing to rise. She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She stood. That evening, a reading event was scheduled at the public library. Adelinda had RSVP'd maybe. Now, she walked through the front doors with the recorder in her coat pocket. Inside, the kids were rowdy, the volunteers overwhelmed. A stack of books sat abandoned on a table. She picked one up, sat cross-legged on a carpet square, and said, "Want to hear a story?" Silence fell. Tiny bodies gathered around. One boy climbed into her lap. Another leaned against her shoulder. She opened the first page and began to read. Midway through the second chapter, a shadow entered the room. She didn't have to look up. She knew it. Sasha sat down first, cross-legged, right in front. No headphones, just eyes, watching. Russell stood behind him, quieter, unsure. When the reading ended and the children scattered like wind-blown leaves, Sasha stepped forward. He handed her a drawing freshly made, still smudged. In it, she sat in a circle, surrounded by kids. At the edge of the paper stood Russell, holding a pencil as if about to step in. And Sasha, right in the middle, holding up a sign. "Please say yes." She looked up. Russell's hands were in his coat pockets. His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't need to say anything. Adelinda stepped closer, looked at Sasha, then gently reached out her hand, palm up. The boy placed his recorder in it. "Can we record something new?" he asked. She smiled. "Only if you promise not to delete the old." "I promise." Russell exhaled almost in disbelief. She turned to him. "You have a lot to learn about staying, but I'm willing to help. As long as you're willing to be quiet sometimes and listen." "I will," he said. "To both of you." That night, a new file appeared on Sasha's recorder. Labeled, "Home, Take 1." And for the first time in years, he played it on repeat. Smiling.